Alright, so yo, what's good? What's good? What's good? So I guess there's a LAN, an international Team Fortress LAN coming up. It's the Fizz Gun Fireside Denver. So, anyways, that took me by shock. After like I series had, you know, come to an end and rewind as well, I was actually surprised to see another venue picking up an international LAN. This is S tier. This is international. So Denver, Mile High City. It's pretty dope. I guess I'm just gonna like do a little like prediction video on this, on like what who I think is going to win this. I haven't seen the rosters yet, but I'm gonna assume a lot of them are kind of the same from RGL, at least the NA teams. But I'm just gonna like make like my predictions on who's going to win this thing. Also just kind of like analyze the teams themselves and give like my input on that as best I can. I'm no invite player. I'm not even open, but you know, I would like to try to give some input as a avid watcher, you know, who's seen all these players, who's been watching for, you know, a decent amount of time. So there's 8 teams, it looks like, going to this LAN, and most of them are NA, looks like. Wow, we only got, yeah, so we got a handful. We only got like one EU team, I think, plus an EU player on an NA team. Which I guess like it must be hard to scrim like this, no, on that ping. And then, but I guess when you're at LAN, you're going to 5 ping, so it doesn't matter. This kind of reminds me of like the 17 with Patty on it. That's kind of funny. So I'm kind of just gonna disregard these teams right here. I really don't think they have much of a ceiling. Trip is generally on Scout or on Soldier, so it's kind of surprising to see Trip on Scout. I don't know what Trip Scout plays like. I know Soldier is like pretty solid, you know, #1 roamer. But I just don't really see these teams really going anywhere. Zhao have a really good. So I do think that didn't Lao play on Zhao? I swear. I don't know much about AU Team Fortress 2, but I guess this is like their alternate team variation, kind of like Ferrario Black, I guess. May's a pretty good medic. I just don't see them really going this far, so I'm just gonna kind of disregard these 2 teams. There's not really much to talk about here, you know. Also, on top of that, some of these players I don't really know that well. I don't know anything about this player, or this player, or really any of like the international players outside EU. So, QMD, we got Gun Gun and Yum Yum. Donovan, Zem. So this team actually performed pretty well at what was it, the most recent RGL season. Now I don't know if this was the exact team composition, so I'm just gonna go check really quick. I believe it was close though, so yeah, it's right here. So let's see the difference. I see. Honestly, I do think this iteration is probably. I mean, they're kind of the same, but you do have like the GOAT med right here. Feel me? So, but I do think this team's pretty. Like Psy Guy, it's pretty solid demo. I think Gungan's essentially like an upgrade. So I don't know. I do think they can do something. I do think they could probably knock off these 2 teams, but we'll have to see with the rest. Okay, yeah, they're not knocking this team off. Just like first glance at this team. And also this team's really low on here. This is your Darkhorse team right here. This is the team where you know they're under the radar. You don't like expect them to really go anywhere, but they could probably go somewhere. just looking at this team, just looking at the roster itself, it's really good. It's very scout heavy. So you got Slim and Jay. Now Slam hasn't played in a while, I remember, but then I know like he's been like scrimming. I've seen his logs. It's just like riding a bicycle for him. Like he's already back in it. Like Slim is just Slim again. Nothing needed to be said there. And Jay can like really fit into any system because he's a really selfless player. So he can fit in Froyo. He can fit. He played well on Ascent. He can fit into kind of any system, and if he's playing in a system with Slemnish, like this is the best. I'm gonna like confidently look at these, and this is the best scout duo at this LAN, pretty decisively, I would say. Watch out for these two. They're gonna absolutely frag. So now we get to like their soldiers. So we got High Five and Dingo. High Five's like pretty solid soldier. I would say he's pretty good. I think the other soldiers, I'd say he's better. I think High Five is a better soldier than Patty, but I do think Patty like fits well in Froyo's system. Like he plays his part, he plays his role, he does his job, no questions asked. But I do think High Five like intrinsically is just like a really good soldier. Like he's nothing above average. So I do think that's a good pickup to have. As far as Dingo goes, I know Dingo traditionally is playing demo, but I do remember I forgot what LAN it was. It was one of the local host LANs. He absolutely had really good numbers, really good numbers at that LAN. So he's a LANimal. He can show up at LAN, albeit that was on demo. I think this might be his first LAN on Soldier, I think. But regardless, I do think he could probably step it up if he really wants to. But that's the thing with Dingo. He has to want to step up because, he's a smart player. He's aware. He carried Rebirth that one season. He has crazy LAN stats, like I said. But it's just like he doesn't scrim a lot. And sometimes he just doesn't have like that competitive drive that other players have. Like people, like I heard people call him like careless. I'll just put it that way. So I think that does mean something. I do think he needs to be locked in, but if he's locked in, then I don't think that should really be something to worry about, because he's a smart player. He has to want it, and overall, if he can just like do his job, I think they can go places. Maybe not win this LAN, but I mean possibly. It's possible. I do think it's possible for this team to win this LAN, because then you got Artist, who's like he's a really good demo. He's like up there. He's up there with Habib and Logan. He's like right behind them. Like you could argue, like in a vacuum, him and Logan are kind of like neck and neck. I think a lot of people put Logan above Artist simply because of like accolades and results, which it is fair. But I think Artist is like extremely underrated. Like he's really good. He's top invite demo. So this guy can fuck you. This guy can like put up fucking insane damage numbers. So yeah, really good pickup right here. And then you got Zilly, who's just Zilly is so underrated. He's such a good medic. He's such an amazing medic. He's very skilled. It's just he doesn't play a lot, so a lot of people that kind of just get swept under the rug. But when he does play, he does show up, primarily on medic. So he's a really good medic. So they have like, I would say he's a better medic than Hubada. I'd say he's probably the second best medic at this LAN, unless I'm missing something with Witness AU. I don't know much about Lao outside the fact he played on like a stacked Aegis Fortress team and they won. But Zilly is really good. This is a really good roster. So I do think this is like that. Like I said, this is that Darkhorse team where they could go somewhere. They really could go somewhere. So yeah, really good roster. I can't really say anything about this. I do know Kuki or Susurus. I do know like in his prime he was insane. I don't know if he's in his prime anymore, and like I just don't know what kind of a player he is right now. So I just really cannot speak on this. But maybe Australia will show up. I just don't know anything about Australia TF2 to really have an opinion. Witness E, okay, here we go. So, I don't know if this team is gonna be able to make grands. Just looking at this roster, the two best. So this is like the I-69 roster, but like downgraded, and like at I-69 the two best players were easily Tomas and Celentis at that LAN, and Celentis is gone. Okay, Kaitis is no longer coaching. Just realized that. I haven't seen too many Lucas clips, but from what I have seen, I would say Domo's the better demo. Ixie actually played really well at had really good performances at I-69. He didn't like do any like the heavy lifting, but he had like good stats. He made good plays, so he was pretty solid. I do think Tomas is like the better scout. And it's good to see this core kind of sticking together for the most part. You know, these two scouts, they synergize really well. Poppy played really well. Like, no one on this team really played bad at LAN, you know. And I'm talking about like the older core. As far as like Hugo, I don't really know much about Hugo, but I can safely say like that is a downgrade from Sil. So you have kind of like a handicapped I-69 witness team playing here at another international LAN, and I don't see them like beating Froyo, and I definitely don't see them beating G6. I just don't see. I could even see BT rolling them, honestly. I could see it happening. It could very well happen, you know. I think Witness will be like an underwhelming team, you know. I think that a lot of people are gonna expect them to be really good and to be in the grand finals because, you know, it's international LAN, and they're like the right now they're currently like the representative of like what the best EU has to offer. So, you know, I'm sure they're expected to do really well. I'm sure they'll do well. I just don't know if they can't beat these teams. I don't know if they'll be able to make the finals. I don't know. I don't think so. But I'll save my actual predictions in a little bit. I'm just kind of going over the roster still. G6, okay, G6 is effectively upgraded now. They booted Howard. Looks like they replaced him with a Law Guy again. Fucking goat med. They are going to be. Their floor is second place and their ceiling's first place. That's all I'm really gonna say. They're going to be in the finals, 100%. No doubt about that. They are inevitably going to be in the finals. I really think it's going to be all NA finals, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I guess, if you're NA. So, Froyotech, again, they have a pretty solid roster. This is the roster that won the most recent RGL season. Now, they did actually end up beating G6, albeit without Law Guy, but it was really decisive. It was a sweep. G6 got swept. But Froyo still showed really good capabilities. Even when like G6 was like upgraded in the the upper bracket finals, they Cap couldn't play, so they had Jay sub in, and Froyo still won that. Like, you had Jay on G6, and Froyo still decisively won that. Right now we're kind of comparing value between like Jay versus Law Guy, and I do think Law Guy, like as a medic, it is such like a more important factor than just like simply having a better scout. I think having a better medic is definitely better. So I do think G6 will be better than they were in RGL season. Better enough to beat Froyo at LAN, I'm not sure, but these people show up at LAN. These players show up at LAN. These are LANimals right here. They will show up. And they have shown up in the past, you know. They've beaten Froyo at LAN. So, but Froyo shows up at LAN too. I do think that, like, if we're talking about team like synergy though, I think G6 kind of like takes the crown there, because this core has been together for so long, and like a few years now, you know, several seasons on the board, and they've gone to like understand each other a lot more and play off each other better. Like, they have really good chemistry. So that's kind of like the thing with this team. Froyo's roster is pretty new. A lot of the core just isn't there anymore, you know. But I will say that like this last season, they played really well. Branson was a perfect addition to the team. He transitioned to a flank scout really well. You got the best roamer in the game right now, right? You got Habib, so anything's really possible. But I do think like individually, like this team, I think this team's a lot more like balanced. Like this team reminds me of Mix Up because every single player is just really good, right? There's like the discrepancies between their skill is not really, you know, it's the gaps aren't really that big. You know, like they're all just really really good players, right? Um, so that's kind of like what this team reminds me of. Now I do think that I do think Furrier can win this LAN though, and I actually think they will win this LAN. I do have them winning this LAN, but I have this going to. I think regardless of who wins, I do see it going. I think it's going to be 5 maps. It's going to go to 5 maps. However, I do have Furrier coming out on top, but I do see possible G6 wins. Like it's totally possible that they win. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, but I'm just going to pick Furrier Tech because of this X factor right here. You have the GOAT on the team. You never want to bet against Penny because he has done so much with he's done a lot more with a lot less. I'm gonna just tell you that much, you know, against better competition as on top of that at LAN too, you know. So he's no joke. So you know but yeah, really good scout duo. Patty's solid, you know. I know he has like a reputation of not working well on the other teams, but on Froyo, I know Grant loves him. He does what he's told. He works in the system. So out of Froyo, Patty's solid. You know, he's solid on this team. Laz, I don't really, there's nothing really to say about him. He's pretty self-explanatory on the what kind of a player he is, like the caliber player he is, you know. Same what goes with Habib, right? So I do think they can get to Grands. They can absolutely get it to Grands. And yeah, so now I guess I'll just look at like other teams and like how I think they'll perform. I do think Ball's team will probably make it to like, I think they'll probably lose in like the upper or lower bracket finals. I just don't see them realistically winning it, and it's hard pressed for me to see them making the finals. But I do think it's possible, right? And I do think that that's something Jay kind of needs to do regardless, because like if we're talking about legacies here, first of all, G6 have the most pressure on them to win this LAN. None of these players, all these players, they have like a LAN win, but it's not an international LAN, right? That's what's missing from the resume. A lot of these players, they have everything else they need to have a good resume, except in like an international LAN win, and that would be very that'd be very useful to have. You know, that'd be really good to have on the resume. So I do think like this team is really gonna want it. You could say they probably really hungry for this. They probably are the hungriest team at this LAN, because none of these players have an international LAN win. And bot mode kind of came close, and then he like fell flat in the Grands. Like they won the upper bracket finals, and then they choked, you know, or underperformed, I guess, you know. So this is like, and there's not that many opportunities to win international LAN. There aren't that many to go around. There's only like one every 2-3 years, right? And I didn't even know this one was gonna happen. So the opportunities they're not that plentiful, you know. They're not that abundant. So I think there's a lot of pressure on G6 to capitalize and solidify this team as like one of the greats, right? They haven't won a national LAN. They've won one LAN 3 seasons, right? They won season 10, season 11, and season 15. Okay, that's really good, but it's not like transcendental, right? I think if you win an international LAN, you have like established yourself as like a staple of competitive Team Fortress 2 as a top team. So yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on this team as a team and individually as well, especially like on bot mode, because he's like I think like they have him as like a top 20 player, right? And I think like a huge thing missing from his resume is an international LAN win, and I think that's something he absolutely needs to do and put under his belt to, I guess, like have better representation. You know, I do think he's underrated, but I do think he needs results, like a result like this to kind of speak for his placement. You know, so I think there's a lot of pressure on J6. I also think there's a lot of pressure on Jay, because Jay, again, I have Jay as like my third best player of all time, right behind Benny and Starkey. And I do think that if he could win an international LAN, if he can carry a team to an international LAN, like Benny has done, right, I would put him at 2. I would actually move him above Starkey. But the thing that Starkey has that Jay doesn't is Starkey has international results, right? And if Jay can carry this team, and not even carry, he has Slam, he has Artist, he has Zilly on demo, right? He has a decent soldier core. If he is that guy, if you are that guy, you will carry your team to the mountaintop at least once, right? And I'm still waiting for him to do it. He hasn't won an ECAA title. He hasn't won an RGL season outside of Fryotech, right? You know, he hasn't. I don't even think he's won a LAN outside Fryo. Like, he hasn't really done anything, you know, outside Froyo, right? And I know that sounds like a jab at Jay, but Jay has such a good he has such a high prestige and reputation within the community, right? So like, if you really truly are that guy, right, you have to show results. You need to prove it, right? So I think there is pressure on Jay to kind of win this LAN and solidify himself as like a top 2 player ever, at least in my eyes, right? I know Stark has won 2 LANs, but I mean, you have to also consider like the competition also, like, as well as like teammates. I do think this international LAN, winning this international LAN, I guess, especially against these teams for Jay, would mean a lot for his resume. So I think there is some pressure on him. I'm not sure. I'm not saying he feels pressure, but I'm saying like in terms of viewing these players as like historic, like I do think there's pressure on him to win this LAN, because there's not going to be another opportunity for a while, right? Or at least maybe even make the grands would be good suited, but you know, you don't see that on a resume, you know. As for Froyo, I don't really think there's much pressure on I mean, I think there's pressure on Froyo because they won RGL. Don't get me wrong. I do think G6 are probably favorites though, with the additional law guy, but I do think there is like obviously gonna be pressure on Froyo to win. I don't think it's as high as G6 or I guess J, but I do think there is some pressure on Froyo to win this because they're the most recent RGL champions. For Banny, I don't really know if there's like individual pressure on him. You know, he's already proved what he can do at LAN. He doesn't have anything left to prove, but you know, I know he wants to win. I know this dude wants to win more than anyone else. You know, so I know this means a lot to him. So, yeah, and all in all, I just kind of wanted to go over just like who I thought was gonna win this LAN, who I think like needs to win this LAN the most, which like I said, I think is G6 and J. And maybe even like some people on here. Like, I do think Brand Slam winning a LAN would mean a lot for his career, because I think he's better than, I do think like in a vacuum he's better than like a lot of other scout players. I do think he's better than Slem. I think he could potentially even be better than Yamsan Scout, but he just needs those results. He doesn't have an international LAN win. So that's why I'm saying like there is pressure on these people to win this, because like that's kind of like the main thing missing from players' resumes is an international LAN win. I keep saying international LAN. I'm sorry, but it's true. Laz needs one too, right? Some people have him as the GOAT roamer. I have him as the GOAT roamer, but I still think he needs a win, I guess, for everyone else to agree with that, you know. Khabib has won a lot. He doesn't really need to prove anything. Patty doesn't need to prove anything. You know, a lot of these players are just missing that accolade, the creme de la creme of the accolades, right? The magnus opus of accolades, which is an S tier under your belt, an S tier tournament. So, yeah. So, all in all, I do think Farad's gonna win this. I think it's gonna be a really close match versus G6. And then I do think the runner-ups are probably going to be like Witness and Balls Team, but I do think Balls Team are going to pull it through and probably get third. Yeah, it's just hard for me to see them beating G6 and even like Froyo really. So yeah, that's kind of just my predictions and everything. I'd say this goes 5 maps. I can't really say much about like upper bracket finals, but that's kind of my finals prediction. And yeah, if I missed anything or if I like said anything that like isn't correct, feel free to like let me know. But like this is just based off what I think as like a viewer who watches professional Team Fortress 2, regularly. So yeah,